Hi, my name is Robin. Welcome to Dialogue with America. This is our first podcast, and we're going to be talking about issues that are near and dear, not only to me, but to all of us. I think this very first podcast is going to be about something that's near and dear to my heart, and probably to yours as well. We've come to a place in this country where we're kind of divided and conquered in a way so that people won't agree with each other and other people can think for us and make decisions for us, whereas that's been taken away so that we argue with each other constantly. There's never a give and take, and never a discussion or a dialogue about the issues. There's shouting at each other. That's what happens on Facebook and Twitter, other social media platforms. People leave a statement and other people call them names and call them progressives and alt right and antifa. I mean, and people are yelling, kind of like it's being done at the top of the government right now. The name calling aspect of it, which I really think we need to get away from. We need, if we don't have a leader who's going to lead us so that we can talk to each other and calm us down, we need to do it for ourselves. And that's what this podcast is really all about: is reaching out to you, to an audience, um, so that we can talk about issues that are near and dear to our heart, and not, we can argue about them. No shouting, no name calling. It's not appropriate because then you shut out and you shut down the other person, and then you don't hear them. You kind of you're hearing, when you get angry, you're hearing in your eyes, your vision is narrowed, your hearing is less, and then you get angry and you don't really see or listen or hear the other person speaking. And it can't just be that my opinion is the only one that matters. Everybody's vote counts. Everybody votes for different reasons. Your reason is not the same as mine. Yours might be economic, mine might be political, yours might be have to do with your kids, mine has to do with my parents, maybe mine has to do with in medical insurance, yours has to do with paying too much for it. Whatever the reasons, we have to talk about them. We don't have to shout at each other, and we don't have to belittle each other. We have to find that common ground, which we've always had in this country my whole life. I grew up in a time that was against the Vietnam War. People demonstrated, but we did it peaceably. We did it peacefully. We had marches on Washington through the streets. Um, um, my mother marched on Washington for civil rights in 1963. She was a bit of a maverick. She came from a family, a middle class Jewish family, and no one in her sphere, including my father, wanted her to go to Washington. Everybody was afraid that she would get hurt. Nobody really knew what was going to happen because there were burning buses and people being hosed down and beaten up, and down south when there were civil rights events. My mother felt it was important for her to have her views known, and by marching and protesting and resisting, that's how she was able to tell the people around her in her world and other people who were seeing it on the news how she felt about the issue. In fact, um, she has said to us, when she's almost 90, and she said to us, when I die, on my final marker, I want to say community activist. She wants that same title that Obama had when he worked in Chicago. He was a community activist or advocate. That's what she wants, because that's how she sees herself. It's very hard to talk to my mom about discrimination or to have her see it. She literally cries when she hears it. And this is, her memory is not all there. It's pretty much there, but even so, it shines through her feelings about other people, about immigrants being displaced, about taking away um, the right to fight for asylum here in the United States, things that we've always had, and to have immigrants be treated with respect, not have children abducted or taken away. I know, there people have said, well, Obama did it, and Obama took, Obama did something different. Those kids in 2013 came here. They were unaccompanied minors, and he had no choice but to take them because, he couldn't just send them back, and he didn't. He didn't deport those kids. He didn't make a law. There was no legislation for that. Um, what Trump did was, and Sessions, they made a policy, and the policy was that anybody seeking asylum here in the United States was declared an illegal, and their rights were taken away, their children were taken away, because they wanted to use it as a deterrent for other people seeking asylum here, or other people wanting to come here. And now they've even turned the tables, besides this Muslim ban that they have, and they can call it what they will, it's a Muslim ban because it's those countries, or to call people that come here from Africa those shithole countries. We've never had anything in my memory where someone has disparagingly spoken about immigrants this way. Even, I was listening to President Reagan's final speech the other night, and he talked about immigration. He talked about immigrants and the respect laws. And I didn't like Reagan. I didn't like his politics. They were too conservative for me. But they called him the great communicator, and he was, because, and even at that point in time, in that year, was it 1992? Reagan had the beginnings of Alzheimer's. We didn't know it, but he talked extemporaneously about immigration and how respectful, and how we've all come here from someplace else. Unless were Native American and your family was born here, we are all immigrants. And for the president to talk about chain migration, which is his favorite, phrase, chain migration being that, your family can come here, if your husband or your wife get citizenship, they can bring in their family members. And he's against that. And lo and behold, Friday, the First Lady, Melania Trump's mother and father got their citizenship. How? Through their daughter, who got hers through her husband, through what he calls chain migration. So why is it okay for people with wealth, white people with wealth, and not for brown people or other people who need it on an everyday basis? My husband is an immigrant. He came from another country, and he brought his parents here, and his sister and brother here, and they live here. His parents died here, and they were buried back there. But they were Holocaust survivors. His father was in a slave labor camp. His mother lived as a Christian nurse, I think, in Budapest, in Hungary. She hid from the Nazis, in plain sight, wearing a crucifix, and she's Jewish, and they were Orthodox Jews. My father-in-law's first wife was murdered by the Nazis, and so was her daughter. So was their daughter. So my husband's half sister was murdered by the Nazis, and she was 2 years old. So this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. So that when I see in my country that I've grown up in, acting in a way that I know is going to become the fascist way, like it was in the 1930s, and an isolationist policy like it was here in the United States then, and kind of anti-Semitic. It was, and they wouldn't let the Jews, the refugees from Europe here. Roosevelt, and I forget the guy's name in the State Department, did not. They were kind of anti-Semitic, especially the guy from the State Department would not allow any of the refugees here. It was a really, really tough time for this country. And we were isolationists. It opened us up to being targeted by the Japanese. There's lots of things. History repeats itself. That's why you're supposed to learn from history, study history, learn from it, so that you don't repeat and make the same mistakes. Since the end of the war, since the end of World War II, we've had NATO, these countries that have fought communism, they have fought fascism. They've banded together. When we went into Iraq, when we went into Kuwait, we had these NATO member countries that worked together with us to save the world from a World War 3. And here we are living in a phase where where this president wants to make our country less safe by letting the Russians through the front door, literally, of the White House into his office. Um, for whatever reason, we don't know the reason yet, but Robert Mueller is finding it out. But to take it on its head and call this a fake news, and to say it never happened, and to say the Russians, what Russians, and then the story changes over time that yes, the Russians, but so what? I didn't collude, and collusion's not a crime, but conspiracy is. And for Americans to say, well, no, I believe in the president, so he would never do such a thing, even when presented with evidence. What's happening now is that we're being told, don't believe your eyes, don't believe the evidence, don't believe what you see, don't believe what you read. It's really because they're lying to you. I'm the one who's telling you the truth. Well, that's what dictators do. That's what autocrats do. And I don't want to live in a country that's autocratic and that's a dictatorship. And I don't want to have to be like what Nixon told those who protested the Vietnam War. I don't want to have to love it and leave it. That's not what we should be doing with each other. We should be talking and saying, why is it suddenly okay for Russians to be in the White House and us to not know what's going on? The triumvirate of an autocratic USSR, of an autocratic United States, and an autocratic China, these Axis powers, these current Axis powers that Trump foresees happening, and maybe North Korea as a fourth. It's very scary if you think about it, because what has Russia wanted to do but to break up NATO's alliance? They want to break up the Western alliance because they were kicked out. They believe that the press, free press, are an enemy of the people. They don't like they are homophobic. They don't believe in same-sex marriage. They don't believe in a free speech. And I think it's really important that we all learn a lesson from this, that we talk to each other and we find out what it is we have in common, what our shared goals are. And we have to put country before party. We have to. Because if we don't do that, if we don't put country before party, we won't have a country to stand behind. Have a great weekend. Bye. Thank you for listening.